Thank you for joining us. My name is Mara Walsh, and I will be your host today. It's so exciting to be on Zoom to host this virtual tour this week. I've been out and about on real life tours for the past several weeks, and actually this past several months. I've recently been to Eastern Europe on a Christmas markets river cruise. That was really a great time. And also I spent a couple weeks, maybe 3 weeks in January in Southeast Asia, which was completely amazing. It feels great to be out on tour again. But tonight we're back in our armchairs for virtual tour. I'm going to share a little bit about myself for those of you who are coming on for the first time, or those of you who have a very short memory. My name is Mara Walsh, and I am located in the United States, specifically between Philadelphia and New York, which is in the Eastern Standard Time Zone. I say that only because there's a little bit of confusion sometimes if you're not in my time zone, what time the tours actually take place. So you'll know to convert them if needed, and just keep an eye on the time changes. As we may know by now, when we're not traveling, I host groups on physical tours, as well as help others plan their own family and group vacations. My tours are mainly adult-only tours, which are open to all genders, and my summer trips mostly are multi-age, multi-generational tours, and they're open from teens through senior citizens. If you want to follow our physical tours, please join my private Facebook group on Facebook, which is Girl Travel Tours. You have to ask to be accepted. It's a group. I have a page and a group, so you'll want to join the group to do that. You can always follow along where I'm going, and also provide your comments as to where you've been as well. As you know, when COVID struck, we were unable to travel physically, so I started traveling with my tour guide friends virtually. It's been a great few years. We've gone to a lot of places all over the world virtually, and I am very happy to continue doing this with you while we are in our homes. Some of us obviously have more availability in the winter, so we do have a little bit of a winter series going on right now. We've done about 80 virtual tours, and the recordings of all of the tours we've done in the past few years are available on girltraveltours.com, as well as my YouTube channel. They are now indexed by region to make it easier for people to find. They're also on my Facebook page and on YouTube. And you also see the physical tours that I have planned coming up in the next years. So if you're interested in traveling with us physically, please drop me an email at marawalsh@gmail.com, or drop me a PM on Facebook, however you want to get in touch with me. There's also a contact form on my website, so you can get in touch with me any of those ways. We'll be traveling to many places, both physically and virtually. So you'll see those locations on my website. Okay, so let's review a few ways we can interact during this event. If you want to ask a question to Ione, who is our tour guide today, you'll want to put that in the Q&A, and she will address those questions at the end of the tour. If you want to drop a note to me, do that in the chat, and I can go back and forth with you during the presentation. As always, I will include an interactive poll. I'm going to launch that poll right now. And essentially the question is, what's your connection to Amsterdam and the Netherlands? I'm going to launch it. And the choices are, I've been and love it. I have a trip booked. I plan to go in the future. I have no set plans, but I'm interested in the location. And I'm solely interested in experiencing it virtually. So funny as it were, about a year and a half ago, I had never been to Amsterdam in my life, which was interesting. And in the past year, I've been twice. It's a wonderful city. I absolutely love it. I can't wait to go back again. I have a trip planned for 2025 for tulip time and then a cruise. So if you're interested in potentially going back or going to Amsterdam and some other regions with me, let me know. But so it looks like a lot of people have been to Amsterdam, about 44%. I'm going to actually let you see the results About 44% have been and loved it. There's a lot of people who have no set plans but are interested in the location. And that is Ione's job, to make you flip from just being interested to booking a tour, because she will be passionate about this location and share with you all the wonderful places in Amsterdam and its vicinity. So I'm going to take this off. I'm sorry it keeps coming into the shared screen, but I'm going to stop sharing it so that it stops doing that. And then we're going to move on. So as I said, as you know, a tour wouldn't be complete without a wonderful tour director. And today we have somebody back who has done a few tours with us in the past virtually. Her name is Ione. Ione has brought us tours from the Netherlands and Belgium. And we can't wait to see what she's going to bring us tonight. But if you're interested in her other tours, you can check them out on the recordings after this tour is finished. I'll share with you via the chat and during the Q&A how you can leave a tip for the tour guide. If you appreciate this presentation and Ione's knowledge and passion, all the tips will go to her at the end of this presentation. Actually, the tips that are accumulated past today will also go to Ione. So today, I want to welcome Ione back with us, and thank you for joining us. Welcome, and feel free to come on. You can take the controls, share your screen, and we can get right into your presentation, Ione. Welcome. Nice to see you again.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Mara. Hi. Can you see the screen well? Okay. I see, the only thing I see, it's a window on my screen, the window of the poll. Oh, maybe I can click it off. Okay, fine, I'm ready. So welcome, everybody. Very nice to be here again. Thank you, Mara, for inviting me back. My name is Ione. As Mara has correctly pronounced it, it's not an easy name, but well done, Mara. Today, I will virtually lead this tour in Amsterdam, capital city of the Netherlands, and my second home. I'm very proud to be presenting to you my country of adoption. I'm half Italian, as you can guess from my accent, and half Kiwi. My mother is from New Zealand. Well, then to make this complete, I moved 12 years as I fell in love with a handsome, tall Dutchman who eventually has become the father of my two children and my husband. So let's start exploring Amsterdam in my favorite time of the year, winter. When I moved there in 2011, it was the winter season. This image that you see of the windmill in the snow is a photo that I took myself, probably the very first week I arrived to the Netherlands. Since centuries ago, Dutch artists have captured the love of Dutch people for their winter sunny, icy days. That winter, when I moved for good to the Netherlands, I fell in love. It was like living in a crystal world. Friesland, the province in the north where I was living, was covered with ice and snow. I remember we even built an igloo in a backyard. Canals had disappeared under a thick layer of ice, which was running to the limit of the flat Dutch horizon. There were children, people of all ages, men and women. Everybody was out skating, as you can see in this picture that I took in Amsterdam. This is one of the canals in Amsterdam, completely covered with ice. There is a special word for it. They call it, Dutch call it the ijspret, literally the joy of the ice. And this joy of the ice was there for me, was there to welcome me. It was a cold but warm welcome at the same time, because to me it was like living in a fairy tale. The Frisian Dutch countryside with its farms and windmills, cows, it all seemed so different, but yet so cozy. And there is another Dutch word, very typical Dutch, which is gezellig. Gezellig means lovely, enjoyable, cozy. And it is a very unique Dutch word that hasn't got a real translation in another language. So in Friesland, in this province of the north, they host one of the oldest Dutch traditional event, which is called the Elfenstedentocht. In English, it's the 11 Cities Tour, which is the longest and toughest skating marathon in the world. It's a long distance tour, almost 120 miles, which is held both as a speeding skating competition and also as a leisure tour. And the participants can go up to 16,000, and they have to deal with bad ice, bumpy ice, strong winds, snowstorms, and all kind of other misery. And guess what happens if you win? You receive this medal, such a tiny, small memorial cross. The prize is what you suffer during the competition. This is so typical Dutch. The prize is participating to the contest. The competition starts and ends in the city of Leeuwarden, passing through these beautiful 11 historical Dutch cities that I really strongly recommend you visiting if you go to the Netherlands. The natural ice along the entire course has to be at least 6 inches. It has to be thick enough. Because of the great distance and difficulty, the Tour of Tours. The first was held in 1909, and the last time it happened, it was in 1997. You can call it bad luck or global warming. The Dutch generally perform well in speeding skating contests, especially in the Winter Olympics, and especially skaters coming from the province of Friesland. What they do when the ice comes, they put often speakers outside, they play music, they put cozy lights, and they skate all day long, also in the evening, warming up when it gets too cold with the favorite Dutch winter drink, the chocolate milk. So, some clarification about the country. Holland is not the name of the country. The term Low Countries refers to a coastal lowland region in northwestern Europe, forming the lower basin of 3 rivers, the Rhine, the Meuse, and the Scheldt, and it comprises Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg, Benelux. The country covers 16,100 square miles, and it's slightly bigger than the state of Maryland in the US. You can drive east to west, north to south in a little more than 3 hours. This is a man-made country. It's like a miracle, and its achievements as a whole are undoubtedly something that resembles this magic. Nowadays, the Netherlands is the second most largely populated country in Europe. It's a rich country. After the US, it's the world's second largest exporter of food and agricultural products. The total population is around 17,500,000 people. Oops. So the clogs, the klompen, approximately 3 million pairs of klompen are made each year. They are sold throughout the whole country. A large part of them goes, of course, for tourist souvenir. However, some Dutch people, particularly farmers, gardeners, my father-in-law, still use them every day. Traditionally, all wooden Dutch clogs have been officially accredited as safety shoes, safer than steel cap protective shoes in some circumstances. So the Dutch have a saying, God created the world, but the Dutch created the Netherlands. The Netherlands is a product of human endeavor, made of the so-called polders, strips of farmland separated by canals with techniques that drain wetlands and make them usable for agriculture. There are something like 3,000 polders in this country. In this map, you can see how the Netherlands look in the 1300s and how they look today. The first polders were built in the 11th century. By 1961, 6,800 square miles, more or less half of the country's land was reclaimed from the sea. About half of the total surface areas of the polders in Northwest Europe is in the Netherlands. Dutch are in general more aware of environmental issues than the most. They need to be, for their high density of population, heavy industrialization, extensive farming, and more than a quarter of the land below the sea level. This is one of the pictures you will see when you get off the plane in Amsterdam Schiphol Airport. It is the Afsluitdijk. Today, almost 1,500 miles of dikes protects the low flat land from the invasion by the North Sea. Without the existing dikes, 65% of the country would be flooded daily. In 1932, the Zuiderzee was closed off by the Afsluitdijk, which is this 20 miles dike connecting Friesland and North Holland on the other side of the Zuiderzee. The Zuiderzee was no longer a sea, and it was renamed IJsselmeer. Meer means lake in Dutch, as the continuing flow of fresh river water soon flushed away the salt water. Let's talk about the Dutch royal family. The Dutch monarchy is a parliamentary constitutional monarchy since 1848, when the King Willem II granted a new and more liberal constitution to the people of the Netherlands, making the monarchy the servant of the elected government. The monarch, Willem-Alexander, that you see in this picture, succeeded to the throne following his mother's abdication in 2013. And he married Maxima Sorreghieti in 2002. Maxima is the first Argentine-born queen in the history of the Netherlands. When the couple announced their engagement on the 30th of March 2001, Maxima spoke in Dutch during the television broadcast, and people adored it. Ouch. I don't know if you have followed the World Cup in 2022, but this was the quarter of the finals between the Netherlands and Argentina. As they say in Dutch, it was niet zo best. I was constantly wondering what the atmosphere, the royal palace was that night. By law, the king has the right to be periodically briefed and consulted on governmental affairs, but his role is basically formal. The current king, Willem-Alexander, represents the 11th generation from the area of the first Dutch king, Willem the Silent. Every year, on April the 27th, they celebrate all over Netherlands the Koningsdag, King's Day. It is the biggest and best street party in Europe that celebrates the monarch. It's really great to be in the Netherlands in this time of the year, also because this is the time of the year where you can admire the blossoming of the tulips. There is live music everywhere. There is a giant flea market, and everybody is allowed to sell all sorts of things. People wake up like at 4 or 5 in the morning to secure themselves a stall on the street where they can put all the items that they want to sell, things that they no longer need, or their self-made drinks, coffees, cookies, and so on. You make incredible deals on these days, and everybody wears orange as to honor the royal family, because the orange is the color of the royal family. So, orange carrots. According to the legend, the Dutch farmers at the time began to develop and cultivate orange varieties of carrots as a mark of respect for Willem House of Orange. This makes a very quaint story for tour directors, but unfortunately, it's not true. Here we have the queens of the Netherlands. The most notable of the Dutch royals was Queen Wilhelmina, who approached her job as if she were a general. She was queen from 1819 to 1948. After her, next to her, Queen Juliana. And in this picture on the left-hand side, Queen Beatrix, who ruled the country from 1980 to 2013. When she abdicated in favor of her son, more than a century of female reign over the Dutch ended. And this is a picture of the Tulip Festival in Canada. Why? Because during World War II, the Dutch family had been living in Canada since June 1940, after the occupation of the Netherlands by Nazi Germany. The maternity ward of Ottawa Civic Hospital, in which Princess Margriet was born, was temporarily declared to be extraterritorial by the Canadian government. Since Canada follows the rules of jus soli, it was necessary for Canada to disclaim the territory temporarily so that the child would not become a Canadian citizen, but a Dutch citizen. Princess Margriet was named after the marguerite, the flower worn during the war as a symbol of the resistance to Nazi Germany. In 1945, the Dutch royal family sent 100,000 bulbs to Ottawa in gratitude for Canadians and promised to send 10,000 bulbs each year. Canadian troops liberated the country in 1945, and every year on May the 5th, we celebrate the Bevrijdingsdag, Liberation Day. During the occupation, the Germans put Dutch industry and farms to work for war purposes, and there was much deprivation. The Winter of Hunger in 1944-1945 was a desperate time. The Allies abandoned all efforts to liberate the Netherlands, and the Germans stripped the country out of much of its food and resources, leading it to a mass starvation. People had really nothing better to eat than tulip bulbs. Let's get back to the Dutch political system for a little while, and let me introduce you to Mark Rutte. He is the Prime Minister of the Netherlands since 2010. The executive power is in the hand of the Dutch cabinet, which consists of 13 up to 16 ministers. The head of the government is the Prime Minister, who often is considered to be primus inter pares. He has got no explicit powers beyond those of the other ministers. In this picture, you can also see the most effective pharmaceutical drug used by the Dutch together with paracetamol. An apple a day takes the doctor away. Anyway, as you can see, Prime Minister Mark Rutte, he rides his bike to go to work. This is to show you also to which extent riding a bike is popular here. Here I'm showing you some creative ways to use your bike. You can carry a Christmas tree on it. You can enjoy a nice ride in the snow. And this is a small little section of the very famous bicycle parking at Central Station in Amsterdam. How do they remember where they have parked their bike? I will never understand. Still a mystery to me. And recently they have opened another new gigantic bicycle parking underwater nearby the Central Station. So the history and the success of the bicycle in Amsterdam started in the 60s with the Provo movement and the White Bicycle Plan. Provo was founded in 1965, and it was a Dutch counterculture movement in the mid-60s, sort of a predecessor of the hippie movement. They declared cars to be evil and invaded the city with a fleet of bikes freely available for whoever wanted to use them. This has led throughout the years to the most sophisticated urban bicycle system in the world, with bike lanes, traffic light for bicycles, bike parkings, and so on. Having said that, believe me, in my opinion, the only way to safely bike around the city of Amsterdam is doing it virtually as we're doing it today, because especially for foreigners, it can be very dangerous as they really are wild when they're bikes. Here we are at Central Station and we are ready to start our roaming around the city of Amsterdam. As you stand with your back towards the Central Station, you are confronted immediately with the chaos of trams, buses, and canals. It's a very busy area of the city. The station that you see in this picture was built in 1889 by the same architect who has built the Rijksmuseum, P.J. Kuipers. The people of Amsterdam and the city didn't want it and didn't like it. They fought against the national government, who had decided that the Central Station would have been built here, cutting the city off from the waterfront. This exact same year that you see in the picture was, in the 16th century, the stock exchange of the city, the beating heart of Amsterdam at the start of its golden age. We are going to start our tour. Oops. Okay, this unfortunately, I had a little interactive map that it's not working. It doesn't matter. We are starting our tour from the Central Station, and we're going to go south with the canal called the Denmark stretching before us. From this exact location, having this Central Station at your shoulders, if you walk on the left-hand side, you will be able to spot this building. The Weeping Tower, Schreierstoren. The VOC Cafe is a bar located in the basement of the Schreierstoren. In the 17th and 18th centuries, the crewmen of the VOC, which is the Dutch acronym of the Dutch East India Company, came to this tower to board the flat-bottomed boats for the Dutch island of Texel, where they would wait for favorable winds to start their journeys and their explorations around the planet. The tower's name, Weeping Tower, comes from the crying women that bid their husbands farewell here. To better understand what the VOC, the United East India Company, history, wrote this wonderful book I suggest you reading. It's called Amsterdam, A History of the World's Most Liberal City, and it's written by an American author named Russell Shorto. He says, no company in history has had such an impact on the world. It introduced Europe to Asia and Africa. It pioneered globalization and invented the first modern bureaucracy, advanced cartography and shipbuilding, fostered the seas, slavery and exploitation on a scale never imagined before, slaughtered entire population. Europe was exploring the world and to exploit, to consume. And the Dutch were on their way to become the greatest shipping nation the world had never seen. Amsterdam was about to make itself into the Amazon.com of the 17th century, the place where everything was available to everybody. In the 16th century, meanwhile, pretty much the rest of Europe was still based on a feudal system. This society was based on individuals that bought and sold properties, and that given rise into the world's first multinational corporation, the United East India Company. Wealth caused the Dutch to expand their horizon. The Dutch colonial empire began in 1588 when the Netherlands united in declaring its independence from Spain. The Dutch empire eventually became one of the world's most powerful colonial powers, with outspots in 5 continents. All the spots highlighted in yellow, green, and dark green are the spots that were part of the Dutch Empire. During its height, it included territories around in countries as Tunisia, Suriname, South Africa, United States, and many countries in South America. The Dutch West and East India Company traded with Africa, and the Americas becoming also the very center of the American slave trade. Seamen working for these companies discovered and conquered lands including Tasmania, New Zealand, Malaysia, Sri Lanka, and the Mauritius. So an employee of the Dutch East India Company was the English explorer Henry Hudson, who landed in the island of Manhattan in 1609, and as he was searching for the Northwest Passage. In 1624, a new ship filled with Dutch settlers arrived in that same portion of land and named it New Netherland. To the north, they gave a place the name of Rhode Island, because from the sea, it looked like red, and Rhode is the name of red in Dutch. Other Dutch names were given, such as Breukelen, Brooklyn, Haarlem, Coney Island, and so on. The capital city's name was Amsterdam in the New Netherlands. The inhabitants built gabled townhouses, dug canals, erected 2 windmills. They formed a new society in which was completely shaped and inspired by Amsterdam. They transported their mixed society, and the new city was incredibly cosmopolitan since its very beginning. In those times where the population wasn't higher than 500 inhabitants, 18 different dialects were spoken. They brought the tolerance, the liberalism, and the modernity of Amsterdam and its golden age. Piet Stuyvesant, a Frisian minister's son, was put in control of the new colony from the West India Company directors in 1647, and during his time, the Dutch authorities gave New Amsterdam a municipal charter. Later, in 1664, the Dutch agreed to give New Amsterdam to the English, who promptly renamed it New York, in return for Suriname and full control of the Spicy Islands in Indonesia. Dutch was still, though, the most spoken language and the only European language Indians knew. If you want to discover more about the Dutch colonial history, I strongly recommend you visiting the Gogh Museum. It is an utterly absorbing anthropology museum which began as a collection of colonial items, where you can find gorgeous Indonesian jewelry, Polynesian war canoes, and all the excursus of all the different territories that Dutch have occupied in the centuries. So after this short but important historical excursus, let's go back to our city tour. So moving from the central station towards the beautiful, quieter area of the canals, we come across the West Indian House, which in the 17th century was the headquarters of the Dutch West India Company, and now houses a US associated educational institute. We come along the Brouwersgracht, the Brewers Canal, a radial canal that cuts across the others and takes its name from the many breweries that used to operate along the banks. It is one of the most beautiful waterways. We will ride all the way down to the intersection with the Prinsengracht and arrive to the Noorderkerk and the Jordaan district. So now, since we are off to the canals, let's repeat this rhyme all together in Dutch. Are you ready? Wij smachten naar 88 prachtige nachten bij 88 prachtige grachten. This is the favorite joke of local guides with tourists when they welcome tourists in Amsterdam. I love it only because after years of suffering, I can pronounce it. And nobody expects an Italian to be able to pronounce this. So how do you say canal in Dutch? You say gracht. Since, so this is a picture taken from the water. And for me, the best perspective and the best way to enjoy the city is from the water, because the city is completely built on the water, just like in Venice in Italy. The canal ring came to life in the early 1600s, after Amsterdam population grew beyond its medieval walls, and city planners put together an ambitious design for expansion. Far from being simply decorative or picturesque, the canals were necessary to drain and reclaim the land. Part of the UNESCO World Heritage Site, Amsterdam canals in 2013 have celebrated their 400th birthday. The development of the city took the form of the 3 new canals that would wrap in a semicircle around the medieval center, the Dam Square. 12 miles of canal side were built and 100 bridges were constructed. 3,000 houses were built on shifting marshland, requiring the work of pile driving by manual labor. A single house required 40 pairs of piles to be jammed 40 or 60 feet into the wet sand and clay. The canal houses, as you see in Amsterdam Central Ring today, rest on piles that were rammed into the earth in the 1600s. The engineers knew that they would not rot once they were below the waterline, as they would be preserved for the ravaging effects of the oxygen. Each of the new canals was given a fancy name to attract the nouveau riche merchant class to build gracious homes. But the greatest innovations of the canal ring is that it wasn't designed to serve popes or kings, but people, individuals, merchants, and tradesmen, and their aspiration. The major canals are the single, built originally to defend Amsterdam city outer limits, the Herengracht, where Amsterdam's wealthiest residents moved once the canals were completed, named after the Heren, the 17 gentlemen of the Dutch East India Company, the Keizersgracht, the Emperor's Canal, and a nod to the Roman Emperor Maximilian I, and the Prinsengracht, named after Willem the Silent, Prince of Orange and the first Dutch royal. This Prinsengracht was designed as a slightly cheaper canal with smaller residences and warehouses. It also acted as a barrier against the crusty working class quarter beyond the Jordaan, today one of the most lively and interesting districts in town. So now we are going from the red mark, the North Markt, down, all the way down to Anne Frank House and the Westerkerk. Ah, it's working now. There we go. On the here on the way, we see one of the most beautiful areas. This is the Prinsengracht, which is the outermost central canal designated for commerce. And we're going to stop first at the Northern Markt, which hosts an incredible farmers market. Here, between number 15 and 22, elaborated gables of houses are decorated with agricultural images of a cow, sheep, chicken, from the time where a livestock market was held. We will first come across my favorite district in town, the Jordaan. This neighborhood today is the most desirable area, quite expensive to live in, but once it used to be a stronghold of the working class. A sculpture near the entrance of the church commemorates the bloody Jordaan riots of July 1934, when 5 people died in protest over governmental austerity measures. In the Johnny Jordaan Square, you will also find these other sculptures dedicated to the popular musician that in the mid-1900s, Johnny Jordaan, as other famous Dutch performers. In the area, you'll find also lots of live music cafes, especially if you are blues or jazz lovers. All along this short walk we have taken, you probably already have spotted the iconic Pathhuizen. These are the most famous buildings of Amsterdam, probably the most iconic, and they are recognizable from the shuttered windows right in the middle. Traders would keep their offices on the ground floor of their houses. Their family would leave behind, and on the upper floor, they would pack the goods that they were trading. Upward, you can still see a metal hook hanging down out of the top to each canal house. Back in the days, they would work a rope and pull their crates of goods to the upper floor to push upstairs their goods. What were these goods? Everything you could imagine at the time. Pepper, cinnamon, stockfish, tea, whale oil, sugar, salt, beer, tobacco, everything, every good coming from all over the world. Amsterdam was really becoming the world's emporium. Dutch were and still are seagoing people. In Europe, some of the finest examples of houseboats can be seen along the canals of Amsterdam, which even has houseboat hotels. Houseboats are very expensive because of the number of moorings. This expense has reduced the likelihood that the approximately 2,400 families that live on the inner waters of Amsterdam will find themselves a neighbor. Now we are slowly approaching the Westerkerk. Look at this picture and the amazing light you can get if you take a boat ride, especially around the time of the sunset. This blue-crowned Protestant church was built in 1631 and has become a symbol of the Jordaan. Rembrandt supposedly lies here in an unmarked pauper's grave. Located on the Prinsengracht, number 263, there is a house where the young Jewish girl Anne Frank hid from the Nazis and wrote her diary. In this house, Anne and her family hid from 1942 to August 1944. On May the 10th, 1941, Adolf Hitler troops invaded the Netherlands. At first, the Dutch tried to defend the country, but after Rotterdam had been almost completely destroyed by German air assault, they surrendered, and the Nazi occupation began. The Germans planned to incorporate the Netherlands into a greater Germany after the war, as they believed that both ethnic groups descended from the same Aryan stock. The Anne Frank Museum attracts million visitors annually. Anne Frank is one of the Amsterdam's most well-known former residents. Converted into a museum, the house where she was hiding contains a sobering exhibition about the persecution of the Jews during the war, as well as reflection about discrimination in general. In 1940, there were 80,000 Jews in the city. Today, only 15,000. Jews in the Netherlands had the lowest survival rate in Europe. Only 27% of them survived the Nazi occupation. 58,000 Jews, over 80,000, died in concentration camps. During World War I, the Dutch government maintained a position of neutrality, and between the 20s and the 30s, many Jews moved to the Netherlands to escape the economic depression which was hitting hard other European countries, especially Germany. When Hitler became chancellor in 1933, Otto Frank, Anne's father, and his family moved to the Netherlands. Otto Frank, that you see in this picture on the right-hand side of the picture, was the owner of a bank in Germany and a clever and successful businessman who had connection everywhere in the world, including the US. The Franks didn't have to deal with extortionists. That meant that they didn't need to pay someone to hide them. They were able to hide in the back extension of the warehouse of the company for which Otto was working. They hid there for 2 years until eventually they were betrayed, although no one knows who betrayed them. Despite the occupation, some Dutch people were collaborating with the Nazis. After spending 2 years in the transit camp of Westerbork, they left on August 9th, 1944, in what would be the last train load to Auschwitz. Anna, her mother, and her sister died. Otto Frank survived. And when he returned to Amsterdam, Miep Gies, an employee of his company who had helped him, him and other Jews, gave him Anne's diary. The diary was published in 1947 in the Netherlands and in 1952 in the United States. England it became, after it was published in the United States and England, it became one of the most widely read books of all time. Exiting the Museum of Anne Frank, we will step on one of the most poignant monuments hidden in the streets of Amsterdam. The 3 pink granite triangles behind the Westerkerk recall the persecution of the Nazis, who forced gay men to wear a pink triangle patch. From here, we turn and we are heading towards the Dam Square throughout the Raadhuisstraat. At the intersection with Spuitstraat, we will find the Magna Plaza Mall. The Magna Plaza Mall is a beautiful mall which is hosted in the old post office built in 1908, and it is known as the Pier Mountain because of the pier-shaped decoration of its towers. All along the way, we have passed at this point in front of many beautiful cafes and terraces. In this part of the city, there are many of the so-called brown cafes, sort of pubs where you can drink beer or from the tap, or you can eat something. And when the sun shines, the Dutch people love to sit outside in the terraces to enjoy the good weather, for which sometimes in the Netherlands you have to be a little patient here we have the Dutch beer. You should never tell a Dutch person that Belgian beer is better than Dutch beer, because there is a very strong competition. You don't make much friends there if you do like that. But Belgian beer is better, but we don't tell them. The most famous Dutch brand is the Heineken. Other brands are the Amstel, Grolsch. La Trappe is the only Dutch Trappist beer. If you are here in the winter and you get too cold with all the ice and stuff around, then you will have, probably you will try the snert, or so-called erwtensoup. It's a pea soup with slices of sausage, very yummy. Or another typical winter meal is the stampot with smashed potatoes and the sausage and some greens. Not just soup or heavy food, examples of gezonde eten, healthy. Salmon, wild salmon from the Northern Sea, or the typical Dutch cabbage, the boerenkool. Another iconic thing to eat in the Netherlands, not everybody dares to do it. It is my favorite, is the haring. And this is how you are supposed to eat it, like a cat, from the tail. Another delicacy of the Netherlands is the heel, the so-called paling. And this is my friend Roelof smoking the heels himself. And these are the best heels you can buy in the Netherlands. Now, lunch break is over. We have arrived at the Dam Square, straight down the street next to the Magna Plaza. This square is the very spot where Amsterdam started around 1270. Three main rivers of the North Europe meet in the Netherlands to reach the sea and the inhabitants of the region, where the river flooded into a vast bay that connected with the North Sea. They built here in this exact spot a dam on the Amstel River. The dam would give the community a name, Amstelredam, the dam across the Amstel River. That's the explanation of the name of the city. Today, it's still the national gathering spot, and if there is a major speech or the demonstration, everything happens here. The obelisk on the dam's east side was built in 1956 to commemorate World War II's fallen. This 72 feet long obelisk is embedded with three sculptures: war symbolized by four male figures, peace represented by a woman and a child, resistance represented by two men with howling dogs, flanked by two stone lions that symbolize the Netherlands. The 12 urns at the rear hold soil from war cemeteries of the 11 provinces of the Dutch East Indies. The monument is the focus of a memorial ceremony that takes place every year on May the 1st, when the king places a wreath on the spot. From the Dam Square, you can walk around Kalverstraat, which is a bustling pedestrian shopping street with lots of department stores and boutiques. Again, on the square, to the right, you will see the new church, the national church where all the monarchs have inaugurated, not crowned because Dutch royals don't wear a crown. Only these kind of ceremonies are held here because today it's no longer a church and it is used as a hall for cultural events or exhibition, very often photographic exhibition. The church was built between the 15th and the 17th century in Gothic style. Also on the Dam Square, you will find the Royal Palace. This beautiful palace built on about 14,000 piles between 1648 and 1655. Initially, it served as Amsterdam City Hall. A sculpture on the rooftop depicts Atlas shouldering the globe. It became the Royal Palace only in 1808, when King Louis, Napoleon Bonaparte's brother, ruled the land. In 1813, Prince William of Orange returned to the palace to the city of Amsterdam. While the palace is the official residence of the monarch, the property is used only for ceremonies. Highlights inside the palace include one of the world's most complete and well-preserved collection of the Empire-style furniture as a decorative art. Next to the Royal Palace, on the same square, you see a picture of the Bijenkorf. This is the most loved department store in Amsterdam. The name means beehive. It's a sort of Galerie Lafayette of Amsterdam. It's a luxury department store with a constant updated selection and a fabulous self-service cafe, spreads among 6 floors with a hair salon inside and all the amenities you can imagine. Dates back to the 1870, and so it's 140 years old, and it has been declared in 2001 National Monument. So behind the Dam Square, behind the new church, if you continue, you will find one of the most famous streets of Amsterdam, which is called the Spuistraat. Along the street, you will find the Amsterdam Museum, which is now, though, temporarily moved because it is under renovation. So it's moved to inside the Hermitage Museum. We'll see it later. Close to the Amsterdam Museum, there is this beautiful courtyard named the Begijnhof. The Begijnhof, the history of this place dates back 1150, when a group of women came together to live in a religious community, primarily to look after the sick. These were the first Begijns. They were not nuns and they did not live in seclusion. They had to be unmarried and make a vow of chastity, but they were not expected to make a vow of poverty. They could renounce their vows or any time and leave the Begijnhof. This is a private possession, so silence is expected. Visitors can go, but you are required to stay silent. On this street, the Spuistraat, it's very famous among students, professors, academics. There's lots of cafes and famous bookstores. And the most famous stores of the Boekenmarkt Spar. It's a market for second-hand books, but not only books, you can find posters, pamphlets, any kind of prints in this part of the city. Also here nearby, there is this beautiful neighborhood, which is called the 9 straatjes, the 9 streets, with lots of small cozy shops dealing with winter fashion. And streets is the ideal neighborhood to get to know Amsterdam in all its variety and richness. And it offers also a great overview of the architectural style of the city. This is an example of the shop that you will find in the 9 streets neighborhood. You see, you can find fashion, shoes, bags, antiques, all sorts of things. From the Spui, now we head south, all the way down to one of the most interesting and rich under all circumstances, under all perspectives, district of town, Museumplein. Museumplein literally is the square of the museums. It's also called the Museum Quarter, as the most important museums in town are located here. Van Gogh, Rijksmuseum, Stedelijk, the most known and prestigious museums are on this square. In the winter, a big ice skating pond is placed, and it looks exactly like this. So you see in the back, the Rijksmuseum. Probably now you remember the central station and you can make the connection. It is the same style because it is the same architect who built it. The Rijksmuseum is one of the Amsterdam grandest and most popular museum. King Louis Bonaparte in 1808 moved the Dutch Golden Age collection of paintings, which was hosted in the Hague, to Amsterdam, to place it originally on the top floor of the Royal Palace on Dam Square. In 1876, this design contest was held, and finally the architect Pierre Cuypers won it. The museum opened in 1885 and it became one of the most recognizable icons of the city. Its vast collection showcases iconic art and a wide variety of artifacts that reflects more than 800 years of Dutch global history, including jaw-dropping paintings by the likes of Rembrandt, Van Gogh, and countless more Dutch great artists such as Jan Vermeer, Frans Hals, and other great Dutch masters. Perhaps the most famous painting here is Rembrandt's The Night Watch, which takes pride of place in a beautiful lit hall, allowing visitors to enjoy every tiny details. Here we see next to the Rijksmuseum, you will find the Van Gogh Museum, Vincent van Gogh Museum. In 1905, at the Stedelijk Museum, the City Modern Art Museum, the first exhibition of the art of Vincent van Gogh took place. Vincent van Gogh died only 15 years before, and he wasn't well considered in his own town. Funny enough, the only street of Amsterdam which is dedicated to the painter whose name is globally recognizable, most of the people are able also to pronounce, is one of the humblest streets of Amsterdam. This is the Van Gogh Museum, which is one of the most popular museums in the world, housing also the largest collection of works by Vincent van Gogh, which is made of more than 200 paintings, 500 drawings, and so on. His letters to his brother. When it opened in 1973, since it has opened in 1973, the museum has been expanded and modernized. Reaching back towards the Museumplein, you will find the Kisho Kurokawa designed exhibition wing, which is also nicknamed the Muscle. Along the legacy of Vincent van Gogh, instantly recognizable impressionist work such as his landscape, self-portraits, and especially the sunflowers and the bedroom are displayed in the museum. Not only Van Gogh paintings, but in this museum also works made by Monet, Toulouse-Lautrec, and of course, his friend Paul Gauguin. Next to the Van Gogh Museum, on the same square, you see the building down at the horizon of the picture of the Concertgebouw. It's the concert building of the city of Amsterdam. It was opened in 1888, and it is very famous for its superb acoustic. It's famous to be one of the finest concert halls that we have in Europe. Another museum on the same square is the Stedelijk Museum, also called the Bathtub tub museum because of its shape. It was opened in 1895, and it's the largest Dutch museum dedicated to modern and contemporary art and design. And it's really, truly one of the best of its kind in the world. It contains a number of incredible works by artists, Dutch artists, as well as artists from all over the world, such as Karel Appel, Cézanne, Chagall, Kandinsky, Pollock, Warhol, Picasso. So leaving the museum plain behind us, now you see we went from the very north, the central station, down to the very south, and now we are walking back towards the central station through the eastern part of the city. And we come across the Amsterdam flower market, where you will find tulips, but not only tulips, flowers of every color, in bouquet or as bulbs that you can also bring with you to plant back home. The market has far more than just tulips, and no matter what is your favorite flower, you are most likely to find it here. The tulips originally came from the Ottoman Empire, and their name literally means turban. The tulip is indigenous to Turkey, it's not indigenous to the Netherlands, to Turkey, Iran, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and other central parts of Asia. The tulips first gained popularity in Holland in 1593, thanks to the work of Carolus Clausius, who was a botanist at the University of Leiden and who planted for the first time the bulbs in the Netherlands. The fame of this beautiful bloom spread rapidly, and the flower was immediately popular, especially within the upper classes. As the tulip gained ground, competition amongst growers started to produce the most beautiful species of the tulips. Most admired were the tulips in vivid colors, which were multicolored or had lines, stripes, flames on the petals. Ironically, we know now that these variations come from a tulip-specific virus, and they should be actually considered imperfections. Anyway, tulip became a luxury item and also a status symbol. People were willing to pay vast sums of money for a single bulb, and the prices rose constantly. Soon, the tulip mania was gripping the country. The speculation in bulbs increased as the people saw this as a quick and easy route to make their fortune. In 1636, stock exchanges were established to trade in bulbs and their future options. People sold land, houses, and valuable objects to invest in tulip bulbs. The so-called tulip mania. Of course, this hype had to end sometime, and in 1637, the market crashed, leaving most traders with not much more than a bunch of flowers, really. So today, the tulip mania, this term, is used to refer to any large economic bubble that cannot last. Dutch tulip growers still dominate the world tulip bulb industry. They produce 4.32 billion tulip bulbs each year, 53% of which are grown into cut flowers. This is a picture I took at the auction flower market in Aalsmeer, also a very interesting place to visit if you are in Amsterdam. It's close by in Amsterdam, 1 hour driving, and you should be there very early in the morning to see some action, around 7 a.m. So after the flower market, continuing, we passed through Rembrandt Plain, this beautiful square, very lively, dedicated to Rembrandt and his masterpiece, where you will find also lots of places to eat. You can try the frites, the French fries made from whole potatoes. But in this area, you can also find some very nice Indonesian restaurants. Being Indonesia a colony of the Netherlands for many centuries, Indonesian food is considered typical in the Netherlands, and you find some of the best rice tafel, which is this Indonesian specialty with rice and different toppings made with meat or fish, and of course spices. Very delicious. Also, you should not leave the Netherlands if you haven't tasted the pancakes, pannenkoeken. Pancakes and cheese. They call it kaas. The majority of the whole cheese that is sold is the Gouda, can be old or young, with herbs or other little things added, but it's the Gouda cheese. And these are sorts of cookies. On the right-hand side, you see the stroopwafels. And on the left-hand side, this is a very sweet, cute tradition in the Netherlands. It's called beschuit met muisjes. And it's, muisjes is anise sprinkles. And by tradition, if you have, if a baby is born, if it's a boy, you serve the beschuitjes with the blue. And if it's a girl, you serve the beschuitjes with the pink. We are now in the area of the Amstel River in the city center. This river is connected to several of the city canals, and it hosts a number of great venues, such as the Amstel Hotel, the Royal Theatre, the Hermitage Museum. There are several historical bridges crossing the river Amstel, among which the Magerbrug, the Skinny Bridge, and the Blauwbrug are the most famous ones. The Skinny Bridge, Magerbrug, is super picturesque. Many Dutch people like to go here to take their wedding pictures. It was built in 1670 and it's still operated by hand. And at night is illuminated by 1,200 lights. And now we are slowly heading back. And we will cross. So you see, we are going back like in a circle to the central station, and we will come across the Jewish district in Amsterdam. In this area, there is also this famous Hermitage Museum. It is the Dutch branch of the world-famous Hermitage in St. Petersburg, portraying Russian history and culture. The Tsar Peter had a special relationship with Amsterdam, having lived in the city for several years. So he founded the very first public museum in Russia, and some of the exhibits at the original Hermitage were items that he acquired while he was living in the Netherlands. Back in the days when the museum opened, they used to offer visitors a shot of vodka when you were to be welcomed inside. From March 2022 until 2025, the Amsterdam Museum that originally is on the Spaltstraat, we saw it before, is temporarily hosted in the Hermitage Museum. And this is a very interesting exhibition because not only it presents the traditional history of the city, but also offers plenty of space for lesser known and more recent histories of the city. Close by the Hermitage, you will see the Stopera. The Stopera, it's a building complex housing both the City Hall of Amsterdam and the Dutch National Opera and Ballet. The Stopera was a controversial project that met with heavy protests, particularly from the local countercultural and the pro movement, leading even to riots when the construction began in 1982. Finally, it was open 1986. And here we are in the very heart of the Jewish historical district, and this is the Joodse Historisch Museum, the Jewish Historical Museum located in the center of Amsterdam's former Jewish quarter. housed in 417 and 18th century Ashkenazic synagogues, and it reveals the history of the Jews in the Netherlands, capturing this vivid community which was erased in World War II. The museum also has its own children museum, collects objects and work of art associated with the religion, the culture and history of Judaism in the Netherlands and its former colonies. And we should also mention, speaking about the Jewish community in the Netherlands, we should not forget one of the most interesting father of the modern philosophy, Baruch Spinoza. Spinoza was born in Amsterdam in 1632. He was contemporary to Rembrandt, and he was a Sephardic Jew who can be addressed as the philosopher of modernity. He was one of the first to argue that religion and politics should be divided, and has investigated the realm of individual freedom and democracy. He was inspired from the empirical scientific thinking promoted by Descartes, whose ideas also opened up the road to the Enlightenment that would lead 1 century later the French Revolution and the American Revolution. Spinoza's ideas weren't much appreciated from his community, from the Jewish community, and he had been excommunicated from the Jewish community in 1656. In the same area, you will also find the Dutch Resistance Museum. Tells the story of the verzet, Dutch word for resistance, the resistance of the Dutch during the German occupation in World War II, and it explains also the illegal press, how they operated, and how they kept thousands of Jews hiding. Resistance in the Netherlands took many forms, such as spying for the Allies, helping people go underground, distributing illegal newspaper, and so on. The museum documents these great varieties of activities in a very thoughtful and moving way. Another museum that you find in this area is dedicated to Rembrandt. So Rembrandt van Rijn was born in Leiden. He moved to Amsterdam in 1631 when he was 20 years old. And here he met his wife, Saskia. He was the son of a miller and a baker's daughter, and he was the 9th of 10 children. He attended a good school, and he started his apprenticeship as a painter with a local master. He was very clever, especially at historical and religious paintings. But differently from artists such as Michelangelo or Raphael in Italy, his clients weren't priests or popes, but they were merchants, tradesmen who wanted these stories to be painted and to be showed in their homes to educate their children to the Bible. Another genre that he has begun to master at a relatively young age was the art of the self-portrait, as you can see in this picture. He was a master realist. He had the breathtaking capability to capture light and dark. In his paintings, he's able to depict the personalities and the moods through the facial expressions, which is something quite new for that time. It is very interesting also to note how in these times the rise of portraits corresponds to the idea of people seeing themselves in a new individual identity, no longer bound to the church or to the monarchy. During the height of his career, Rembrandt lived in this house, which hosts today a museum dedicated to him, the Rembrandt House. Rembrandt was too of an emotional painter for his contemporaries. He was also very bad in public relationship, very impatient. Very often he had troubles with money and commissions. He had 3 children with his wife Saskia, who all died at a very young age. So his life wasn't easy. It was particularly tragic. In 1660, he was already bankrupt. He even sold the grave of his wife for money. He died in a very modest house in 1669, and we think he's buried in the Westerkerk nearby Anne Frank's house. So Rembrandt is the icon, probably the most known painter of the so-called Dutch Golden Age. But what is the Dutch Golden Age, finally? In 1648, for the first time in the living memory, Europe was at peace. The Dutch had struggled first with the 30 Years' War, started out as a Catholic Protestant conflict, and then with the 8 Years' War between the Spanish Empire and the Dutch Republic. The Dutch nation was proclaimed, and the nation was divided in supporters of the Republic and supporters of the monarch Willem II, Prince of Orange, and Amsterdam was the center of republicanism. Civil war seemed imminent when the House of Orange brutally invaded the city, but they failed in their project of restoring the monarchy, and a young intellectual Republican named Jan de Witt eventually became the prime minister. De Witt became a strong ally of Oliver Cromwell, and their alliance was based on their common interest to dismiss monarchy from England and the Netherlands. Thanks to this alliance, the Netherlands and particularly Amsterdam grew in an enormous prosperity. Tea, coffee made their way into the Dutch habits. Dutch traders became prominent in India, and Dutch began the colony that would later become South Africa. Amsterdam was in this time richer than Paris. 30% of all books published worldwide were published in Amsterdam, and great artists such as Vermeer were living and working in this exact period. In 1660, Cromwell died and monarchy was restored in England, weakening the leadership of De Witt. In 1672, a combined Anglo-French fleet led by the Duke of York, brother of King Charles II, attacked the Dutch fleet. People got more and more persuaded that monarchy should have been restored, and William of Orange became a stadtholder. De Witt ended up miserably. He was stabbed, shot, hanged with his body set afire, and in this year, 1672, is recalled in Dutch history as a rampjaar, disaster year, which ended the so-called Golden Age. In 1688, under William of Orange, the Dutch invaded England and he became King of England, leading the end of the absolute monarchy in Britain and the beginning of the constitutional monarchy with a stately, strong parliament. One more little walk, and we get back to the central station, but now we have to walk into the naughtiest part of the city. So, coffee shops. In 1973, the government decided to treat marijuana the same way as alcohol. This was, of course, not easy to handle, and they came up with a very creative solution, I would say. Since there was already a distinction between cafes, which had the license to sell alcohol and coffee, and coffee shop, which only sold the coffee and not alcohol, the trade of marijuana moved from illegally from the streets, legally indoor. And the coffee shop began to handle this new delicacy. So coffee shop started handling not just the coffee, but also the trade of marijuana. By the end of the 80s, the city contained 1,500 coffee shops and became the center for hippies from all over the world. Before the COVID crisis, more than 1.5 million tourists have visited the coffee shop in Amsterdam. Amsterdam is the most liberal place on the planet. Prostitution is legal and you need a work permit for it. And marijuana trade is technically illegal, but officially tolerated. The Dutch word for it is gedogen. It's a crazy place, and you may, if you've never been there, you may portray it in your mind as a mayhem. Yet it is nothing like that. And the city is rather often conventional and calm. Dutch people are very conservative, organized, maniacally precise, obsessed with schedules, meetings. They are very practical, and they simply believe that it's better to legalize activities that are there anyway, that would happen anyway, and make money out of it. So it's that kind of liberalism. Historical liberalism involves a commitment to individual freedom and individual rights for all. Liberalism encompasses constitutional governments, democratic elections, freedom of worship, and so on. The root of liberalism easily traced in Amsterdam. It was the world's first stock market with the development of a secular art with Rembrandt and his contemporaries, the crafting of the policy of tolerance, fostering an atmosphere of intellectual freedom that has attracted thinkers from all over Europe, as we have seen in this tour. So the red light district is the expression of this spirit. Some stereotypes about these areas are true. There are plenty of sex shops, peep shows, brothels, sex museums, everything you can imagine. And prostitutes, of course, in these red light windows. It is here strictly forbidden to take photos of the women. There's a 24 hours video surveillance in most parts of the districts. You have to be very aware of pickpockets. It's a very busy area, but you have to respect the neighborhood and obey the rules that are in the neighborhood. The first prostitute window appeared in the Wallen, that's how we call this district of the city, in the 1960s. And today there are something like a few hundreds of windows. In 2000, prostitution, in the year 2000, prostitution, gay marriage, and euthanasia were all legalized in the Netherlands. This is a crazy small alley called Trompettersweg. It's the narrowest streets of Amsterdam, and it's located right in the middle of the red light district. It's very, very busy, very, very famous. You might not believe it, but also in the middle of the red light district, there is the oldest church and the oldest building in Amsterdam, the Oude Kerk. Dates back around 1250, and it is, yes, incongruously located in the red light district. So now from here, we move back to the central station, and we come across the St. Nicholas Church, which is a church dating 1306, rebuilt in 1369 with a Gothic structure. The church is dedicated to St. Nicholas, and this gives me the opportunity to talk to you about my favorite hero, Sinterklaas. Sinterklaas is a legendary figure based on St. Nicholas, patron saint of the children. Dutch people also call him the Saint. He really is the ancestor of modern Santa Claus. In November, he arrives to the Netherlands on a steamboat together with his assistants, the Pieten, This event is usually broadcasted on TV, and all the families go to attend the arrival of Sinterklaas with the steamboat. Meanwhile, he comes to deliver the gift and the present on December the 5th, where he rides all along the country with his horse Americo, and together with the Piton, they deliver the gift to the families. What I love the most about this tradition is that not only you receive the present, but he writes to you some personal letters, some personal messages, usually with a rhyme, where he shares with you compliment about your person, who you are, your reality, but he has the right to share nasty comments, nasty jokes. So it gets really humoristic, and everybody gets this poem written by Sinterklaas, so you cannot even, you cannot protest, because it's the sin to have said those things about you. Behind the central station, there's a few more buildings that need to be mentioned. One is the National Maritime Museum, which holds the world's largest and most notable maritime collections, including paintings, ship models, cartography, and so on. And then there's this other beautiful museum, is the Nemo Museum, a museum dedicated to science, designed by an Italian architect, Renzo Piano. And here you see a picture of the Eye Film Institute. This is a very futuristic architectural structure. It opened in 2012, and it hosts something like about 50,000 Dutch movies and international movies. It's a real, it's a place to be for Dutch film lovers. And last but not least, the Amsterdam Lookout. If you look on the right-hand side of the screen, you see a tower. It's an observation deck with an unrivaled panoramic view of Amsterdam, from where you can see the whole historical center, the port, the polder landscape, the canals, and all the things we have mentioned during this tour. On the top, at the very top of the Amsterdam Lookout, there is also this great swing, 300 feet above the ground. You can swing on the top of the city of Amsterdam. And this really was the end of our tour, which I hope you have enjoyed. Thank you so much for having me, Mara. Thank you all for participating to this tour.
This is awesome. Thank you so much. You brought back a wonderful history for me to remember my time in Amsterdam. I want to thank everybody for tolerating our slight issues with connectivity. I know that it was coming in and out, but I really don't think that it affected the content whatsoever. So thanks for hanging on with us. I realize Amsterdam and Holland have such a strong and heavy history, and it has such an intense art background with so many artists and museums being there. But what I take away when I visit Amsterdam is the playful spirit of the architecture and the wonderful rivers and the fun and casual atmosphere of the people enjoying the spirit of the city. And I think that's something that you only get when you're there and on the ground and walking through the streets. And I have to admit, I've been known to try everything once. So I did indulge in the herring and onions the last time I was in Amsterdam, and I did eat it properly, holding it by its tail. So I guess I am, whatever. I can be noted as one of those people who've done that properly. Ione, if you're ready, you could take a breath, but we're going to go over to the Q&A. If you're ready, we have the Q&A feature on the Zoom toolbar. If you want to open that up, just before you get into it, I'll just remind everybody that I did drop a note in the comments, and I also dropped a note in the Facebook feed where you can tip and how you can tip Ione for this presentation. I think the overarching comment was how thorough and wonderful it was, and you really did give a great sense of the city, so we appreciate that. You will also all get an email tomorrow as a follow-up that will have a link in there for you for not only tipping Ione, but also signing up for the next virtual tour. So if I have taken enough time with that respite while you got your drink of water, are you ready to jump into the
Yes,
questions?
I am.
Okay,
Yes,
great.
I am.
You want to take it from the top? You want to read them, or do you want me to go over them with you?
I'm opening. Okay. I see. Yeah, but maybe you can read them in the meantime because I'm still spotting them.
Sure. So the first question was about COVID testing and requirements. Are there still any requests or requirements to get into Amsterdam? No, right?
No requirements.
Yep. And then is it safe for a young American boy in his university ages, or women or travelers in general, to walk around Amsterdam and be on their own?
It is very safe. Probably the areas, but such as many other big cities, around the central station or in the red light district. But the red light district, there's a lot of police anyway, so it's probably one of the safest spots. You always have to behave respectfully. But Amsterdam, it's a safe city. There is pickpockets, such as in other big cities, such as in London and Paris, but it is a safe city, absolutely.
Sure. So you took us through Amsterdam, and honestly, it was a great walking tour, because I've done almost that same walking tour in reality. But can you talk to us about, if you did that on your own without a tour guide, would you run into people who spoke English everywhere? Would it be difficult for you to get around?
No, Amsterdam is a very international city. Everybody speaks English, and also Dutch people speak English, all of them, because, they learn it at school. The Netherlands is a very small country, so they need to learn at least one or two more languages to get around the rest of Europe. So they're very clever with languages, and they all speak English. But in Amsterdam, it's actually the contrary. It might be even more difficult to come across somebody who's really Dutch, because it is so international and so multicultural.
Yep. Let's talk about the temperature. Can you talk to us about the temperature in Amsterdam in the winter and in the summer? And you had the picture up of the canals frozen over. You can talk about global warming and how that might not happen anymore, but just talk about the temperatures in general.
I think Italians should never be allowed to speak about the temperatures, because we are world famous to be whiny creatures. If we don't have 75, 80 degrees, we think it's freezing. But having said that, Amsterdam is not the coldest city of Europe. If you go north, and if you go to Denmark, Sweden, Norway, it gets much colder. But mostly what it really affects the weather in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands, is the rain. It can be gray. They have, I don't know how many millions words to talk about the rain and the bad weather. It's very windy there, and it's flat, as we've seen now, and it's all a flat landscape, so it's very exposed to all winds, and this can make the weather change from a moment to another. Sometimes you have to dress in layers, because if you're in the sun, you're warm, but if the wind comes, then you're freezing. But in the winter, when I was there 12 years ago, we had all this ice for many days and so on. But so far in 12 years, I have never experienced another winter like that. And so this is a sign, surely is a sign of the climate changing, for sure.
Ione, you talked about a historic book, and I think a lot of people miss the title of that book. Who is the title? What is the title, and who is the author?
Russell Shorto, A History of the Netherlands. I'm gonna write it down in the
chat.
In the chat, yeah.
That's awesome. While you're doing that, I hope you can multitask. I'm going to ask you about the houseboats on the canal. I know that's an interesting situation on how they get there. Can you tell, are they always there all year long? What are the, what's some of the restrictions, and how do they ever move about? Do they have to move? Are they just houses on water? Talk to us about that.
So there's mainly two different type of houseboats. The proper boats where they make a living in it, and then they have these other houses that are built on platforms, and those cannot move. They're like containers on these platforms on the water, and those move. Meanwhile, the boats are boats, so they can move whenever they like. The only thing is that to move around the canals, they often have these bridges that they can lift up in order for the boats to pass through. So it's a complicated thing. It's way easier. You do not often move your houseboat around. You may have a smaller boat by which you want to move around in the small canals of Amsterdam, because it can be complicated. But yeah, so there are real boats, so they can go anywhere. Living on a houseboat is not easy. First, because there are strict laws. There are not so many places to put your houseboats to dock, let's say. So, and the rent of these spaces is very expensive. Amsterdam is a very expensive city, and it's getting worse and worse every year. The housing in Amsterdam is crazy. It's one of the most expensive cities in Europe, for sure.
Where in Amsterdam would you suggest a tourist stay for the best centrally located place? Are there districts, neighborhoods? What do you call them?
The neighborhoods, the districts, I would say the Jordaan, so very close to the Anne Frank house.
Okay.
It's a wider area. It's very cozy, very welcoming, lots of all these nice cafes and designer shops. It's centrally located. You walk everywhere. Although, I mean, as you've been there, Mara, so you know it's not it's not such a huge city. You can easily walk everywhere in Amsterdam. The proportions, it's all relatively small, and the trams, they work quite well. They connect all the main spots of town. Is quite also easy to use public transportation. But the Jordaan, I think it's one of the nicest areas, especially if you're there for the first time.
Yeah. The Anne Frank Museum, how difficult is it to get tickets?
The Anne Frank Museum, you really need to book tickets in advance online. It's not impossible to get inside if you don't have a reservation, but you might end up in a line for 1 or 2 hours in the busiest time of the year, and maybe you don't make it anyways. So I always suggest to go online and try and get a ticket before.
Yeah, they open a certain amount of days out, and I forget if it's 60 or 75, but you know that by going online, and then you just go, literally mark it on your calendar, go on the day that they open and get tickets for the day you want to get them. We've done it with groups several times, and it's not difficult. You just have to be strategic. Yeah. Let's talk about the tulips, as that is a huge, iconic flower in the Netherlands. Talk about the flower market. Does it cost money to get in? Can you just freely walk about? What is the cost about of a dozen tulips in the Netherlands? Is it cheaper because they have so many, or is it not because Amsterdam is expensive anyway? So tell us a little bit about that.
I think it's cheaper to buy tulips in the Netherlands rather than buy them in other countries. The flower market, so if we're talking about the flower market I've shown in the tour, you don't have to buy a ticket to go there. It's simply a whole bunch. It's like on the waterfront. It's lots of stalls, one after the other one, like shops really, where you can go and you can look at the flowers, and they sell also lots of seeds. Otherwise, there is the Keukenhof, and that is another thing. That is this huge park outside the city. It's about an hour driving from Amsterdam, so quite close. And this is this gigantic acres and acres of tulip fields, tulip compositions, and not only tulips, orchids, roses. I mean, any
Orchids,
flower,
yeah. Mhm.
orchids, roses, marguerites, all the flowers you can imagine. And that takes place usually between March and the end of May. It's about 2 months a year, and you have to pay a ticket to, and it's a park. It's a gigantic park with different pavilions that you can visit inside and outside.
Spectacular.
It is spectacular. It is busy, of course, because it's only open 2 months a year, and many people go, but it is quite breathtaking.
Yep.
For sure.
Question about, I had the same question when I was there. Can you explain the 3 X's on the flag?
The 3 X's on the flag, they refer to the coat of arms. It's a sign from the medieval times.
And the X's are representative of, do you remember?
No, the X's are representative of the coat of arms, but now they are mostly used in souvenirs. If you go around the shops, all they've been associated with it's the iconic symbol of the city, but it's present in a lot of doorways in the royal palace and so on, because it's present on the coat of arms of the city. But now it's very popular in souvenirs, so the 3 X's, yes.
How about the bikes? We talked about the bikes. They're everywhere. It's almost impossible to cross a street in Amsterdam without feeling like you're going to get hit, and then you get used to the music that the bikes kind of go through. Can you rent a bike if you're there? Do you even suggest a tourist get on a bike in Amsterdam?
I don't know. I suggest to rent a bike if you are an experienced biker, if you know how to ride a bike, and also if you are at your ease at riding in a city, because it's not in the middle of the countryside when there is nobody. It's a city, so there's a lot of people, cars, bikes, and people. You have to understand how it works. You have to understand that when you walk around as a pedestrian, you have to be careful that you're not walking on the bicycle pad. That is mostly what happens when it goes wrong. If you look down on the ground, if you see red under your foot, you're walking on the bicycle pad. So that's when they will ring the bell and be very angry with you because you're standing in their way. So once you figure out which is the way for pedestrian, the way for bicycles, and the ways for cars, you are mostly fine, because it's actually very well organized with traffic lights for bikes and pedestrians and so on. It takes probably 1 or 2 days to get used to it. And it's not that I don't want to encourage biking, because I think it's much fun to bike around the city of Amsterdam. It's the best way to do it, but only if you are confident at riding a bike, because otherwise it can be dangerous.
Sure. One of the viewers asks, where does the word Holland come from?
So Holland is the name of a province. The Netherlands are divided in 12 provinces, and Holland is the name of the province where Amsterdam is located. North Holland. It's actually 2 provinces, North Holland and South Holland. But this misunderstanding about the name was created by the Dutch themselves, because the tourist board, the tourist commission of the Netherlands, figured that Holland was an easier name for foreigners to remember rather than the Netherlands, which is longer, more complicated to say. So it's actually their fault. They created this misunderstanding, and now they continue to use Holland. If you go on tourist website and so on, more often you find Holland. So Holland is the tourist name for the Netherlands nowadays.
Sure. So the question, The next question is, are there fish in the canals? You can talk about the fish, but maybe you can talk about the bikes that are in the canals instead of the fish.
I think in the canals, it's like when you are in Rome, if you dig a hole, you find things from 3,000 years ago, from some emperor, Julius Caesar. I don't know. I think the Dutch canal are a little bit of the same thing. Probably the best thing is not to know what it's in the canal, just in case you accidentally fall in the canal. You can
Luckily,
get
the water is
sick.
dark enough, so
It's not really safe. You can really get sick if you
Yeah.
fall in that water because it's not clean.
yes, luckily the water is dark enough that you don't see the bottom of the canal.
Exactly.
So you said Rembrandt, oh, this was a clarification question. Is Rembrandt buried in a pauper's grave? You mentioned where he was buried, but someone's clarifying that.
Yes, in a pauper's grave.
Yeah. This is always a question that comes up, and one that we have to talk about, as Europe is not the best for accessibility. How accessible is Amsterdam as a city for those that have mobility issues?
There's two sides of the story. For when it comes to accessibility on public transportation, Holland, the Netherlands, is a very modern country in that sense. So they think about it and they make it accessible very easily. But as many other European cities, when you are in the oldest part of the cities, it isn't easy. All museums are accessible. So all the tourist attractions have been made accessible by everyone. But some restaurants or some hotels in the oldest part of the city center may confront you with that problem because of a matter of space, basically. Yeah.
So,
and because the buildings are old.
How is the city in terms of a homelessness community? Do you have much homeless in Amsterdam?
Look, I'm Italian, so coming from Italy, I was always positively impressed with how many less homeless people I saw around compared to other countries, including Italy.
I agree. I agree.
You see in Amsterdam around the central station, you can see, but most of them sometimes are tourists. Maybe they have used too many drugs, or they have drank too much and they are wasted and they're lying on the floor. But most of them are tourists, I have to say. No, you don't see many homeless people around because it's not allowed. The police or whoever in charge would arrive and help the people. They would not be left on the street to sleep on the street.
Let's talk about the water. A lot of questions about the water levels. Does the town or the city and the country have to regulate the water? Do they drain them? Do they have sinking problems with the city like Venice does? How does it compare?
Yeah. There are some areas of the Netherlands that are constantly more exposed to flooding and problems related to the water, especially the province of Zeeland. They have had the worst flooding in history and so on. But the Dutch are masters of water. I think water is one of the main themes of the country because it's a country claimed from the water. So it's a man-made country stolen from the water. So I think they have like the water is drinkable everywhere. And when you see all the systems of aqueducts, dikes that they have, it's truly amazing, the level of water engineering that they have accomplished in that country. I've never seen it in none of the other European countries. I mean, you can compare it to Venice, but we are centuries backward on that under that point of view.
Here's a question about the houseboats and if there are any of them that you can rent or be a vacation. I know that there are a few that you can vacation on. And I'm sure they are on, you know, they're on normal Expedia, VRBO sites like that. So you can rent a houseboat. One thing
Absolutely.
I don't know, was I
It's very,
asleep?
I think it's very cozy to sleep on a houseboat. Like my husband used to live on a houseboat, and from his, from what he tells me, it's obviously very beautiful. Although it can be, it can be a little humid and cold in the winter, but yeah, it depends on how the boat is isolated and so on. But there are some disadvantages, but to sleep for a couple of nights, I think it's really, really pretty.
Yeah, it's fun. Was I asleep, or did you mention the Gouda cheese? There's a big question in the chat about the cheese.
The cheese, the cheese, we always laugh about this because the Dutch people are very clever also in marketing. They are traders and they are people of commerce. So there is this big joke that they make it sound like they have 1 million cheese, but it's one kind of cheese. It's always the same cheese. It can be old or young, but it's always the same cheese. Only the aging of the cheese changes. Sometimes they add some herbs and so on, but it's incredible how famous they became for one sort of cheese. Right. How they,
That's good marketing.
It's good marketing, of course.
Exactly.
It's an excellent cheese. It's really one of the best.
Yeah, because it's soft and not offensive, right? I mean, it's good for the masses.
Exactly. Actually, all the milk products in the Netherlands are incredible. Something that I haven't mentioned that you may want to try if you are there, which I love, is called the fla. So sort of a vanilla pudding, but it's not as thick as a pudding. You can actually drink it. Like yogurt, but a little sweeter. They have all sorts of dairy products. If you enter, it's fun to go into a Dutch supermarket to see,
I think it's fun to go into a supermarket in any country you travel to, right? That's like a little excursion all on its own.
Bravissima.
It's a lot of fun.
Totally agree.
There's a question. Oh, sorry.
No, I'm saying you learn a lot about the habits. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. There's a question of someone is going to Amsterdam and The Hague in the spring. Are there many antique or secondhand bookshops or antique shops in this area?
Yeah, in the canal area, mostly in the Jordan, or in the area of the Spui or the Spuistraat, the Boekenmarkt, the market of books on the Spuistraat. That's specifically for antique books, but antiques in general can be found also in the 9 streets area of the city. There's
a question I don't understand, so I'm hoping you do. Are there still museum jar carts available? Does that make sense to you?
Are there still museum jar? Like a card that allows you to visit more than one museum at a time within a certain period. Is that the question?
I don't know.
Because you could buy, yes, you can buy, it's called I Am Amsterdam. It's like a card of different amounts of money and it covers different attractions. Yeah. And it's valid for a certain number of days, 3 days, 1 day, 5 days, depends on what you choose. And it allows you the entrance to different museums or reductions on other selected museums.
Okay, and it was museum cards, so you answered it properly. Here's a good question, because this is something that we did when I was there one time. Is Bruges far from Amsterdam, and do you take a train? How far is it?
The Bruges, it's beautiful. After Amsterdam, Bruges, it's a must-see place. Bruges is in Belgium. The Flemish name, the Dutch name of Bruges is Brugge, because in Belgium they speak both French and Dutch. And it is from Amsterdam, let's say if Brussels is 2.5 hours by train, Bruges might be something around that, maybe 3 hours. It's not that far though. It's not
Sure.
that far. No.
Do you have a favorite restaurant you might put out there on this virtual tour
I
as something you
used
would
to-
recommend for local Dutch cuisine?
I like this place. It's a chain of restaurants, so you find them in several spots of town. It's called Luce, and it's a nice restaurant for meat, beef, and so on. And also, I used to love this restaurant called Moeders, which was a typical Dutch cuisine, but like the simple Dutch cuisine, the family cuisine, the
Right.
potatoes with, and it was, I remember I loved it because it was all decorated with items related to the idea of the mother. Pictures or objects. It was called Mothers. That was the name of the restaurant. And another place that I like is this beautiful Indonesian restaurant. Now I can't remember the name, but it will come. It's on Rembrandt Plein, and the square dedicated to Rembrandt is the biggest, the main Indonesian restaurant there. And it was great. They had superb rice tafels. The Indonesian food is a true experience in Amsterdam. It's like being in Indonesia. The quality is amazing.
Yeah, so it's such a diverse city, so there's so many great variations of different cultures and the restaurants too.
Yeah, they have great Italian restaurants. They have, food from all over. And Chinese. There's this beautiful Chinese restaurant nearby the central station. It looks like a temple floating on the wall, which is you find food from everywhere. But I do like the Dutch food. People usually, if you only go to the Netherlands, people say that Dutch food is disgusting because they have lots of, especially around the central station, they have lots of these automatic distributors where you can get like these fried potatoes or croquette or this so-called junk food. But that's everywhere if you think about it. But it's not representative of the real Dutch cuisine, which I think it's also quite healthy because it's basically bread, like sandwiches for lunch, so carbs for lunch, and for dinner lots of protein and vegetables and potatoes. So it's simple. They don't use olive oil, they use butter for everything. They cook a lot with butter, but their butter is really, really good because, again, all the milk products in the Netherlands are very good.
Yeah. While you're speaking about food, you mentioned that the Netherlands is the #2 world exporter in food. What are their main crops that they're exporting?
They export a lot of cabbages, potatoes, tomatoes. I would say these are the main ones. So they have all these greenhouses, you call them?
Yeah.
With the heating. So they produce at an industrial level.
Back to transportation and getting around. Do you need to use public transportation as well as your feet? And if so, is public transportation free?
No, public transportation is not free. You have to pay a ticket. It's around €3 and it's valid for an hour. Then you can use it on the tram, on the metro, but the metro doesn't really cover much in the city. Right. Not many people go around with the metro. Mostly used is the tram. I would do a combination also because the best way to explore Amsterdam is to walk around. If you use public transportation, you really miss the idea of the city. You miss lots of gorgeous spots that are not accessible by public transportations at all. So I would say if you don't feel like walking around too much, then you can take also these nice cruises, like the canal cruises. They have some great ones, just a cruise, or they have other cruises that combine also nice dinner on these boats. You can have dinner while you are, because I think water I mean, the people that I know, my friends that live in Amsterdam, they all have, if they can afford it, at least they all have like even a very small boat, something that goes on the water, because that is also the best way to move around. Because cars, you cannot really drive into Amsterdam city center unless you're not willing to pay €9 per hour to park your car in a parking that you hardly can find, because there aren't so many spots to park your car. So I suggest a combination of trams, boats, and walking.
That's
Maybe
awesome.
do what we did today, in portions, like a piece a day, resting every now and then, because it's so beautiful to see that you forget that you're walking, you forget to be tired. It's just like Venice. You're too enchanted by
That's a
the
great word, actually. It is enchanted. You do become enchanted with the surroundings and the atmosphere. That's very accurate. The last question, Ione, if you're doing genealogy tour in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam specifically, is it easy to get records? Do you know if there are places in the city that allow that type of research?
I have to be very honest. I am not prepared on this. I've never done genealogy tours in the Netherlands, so I really don't know. I know that, but I do know that everything is available into public offices and archives and so on, but they love their bureaucracy, and you get nowhere if you don't have an appointment. So wherever you need to go, whatever you need to do, which is in the office, you can expect to be helped at the very best, but make sure you have an appointment, or you call before, or you know what is the procedure, because there's not much flexibility at improvising things on spot. See, so I think that is the rule. And in particularly this kind of tours I've never done, so I wouldn't know to be.
That's good advice, though. Very good advice. Okay, so our final takeaway, what is one thing, if any, you could say to give our last word of Amsterdam, and what do you want to take away, or what do you want the people to realize or think about when they're thinking about Amsterdam?
As I said this also the other time, but it really is what I feel about the Netherlands, the small little things, the details. Like, to me, friendship in the Netherlands is somebody inviting you for dinner and turning on the candle on the table. The small,
Nice.
the one tulip flower in
Yes.
the vase in the middle of the table. It can be one or two or three, doesn't matter, but the small little things and the detail they put in making everything, as they say, gezellig, like enjoyable. Also maybe because of the weather, because the environment outside, it's beautiful, but it's also sometimes hostile. No, they're fighting against nature all the time. So when they are inside, they create very nice atmospheres.
Yep.
Yeah, this is at least my
That's your
feeling.
takeaway. Thank you so much. Honestly, you gave us such a wonderful flavor of Amsterdam that, of course, now we all want to add it to our list of places to travel to this year. So it was also wonderful to see you again. I hope to see you in person soon. But for now, I'm going to say thank you and goodbye to everybody. And thank you very much, Ione. Have a great day. I'll see you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Livelle.